Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio are Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. And Chike Ogea, former Commissioner for Information, Delta State. Well, we've had two interviews, one with Joe Ajero, Deputy President of the Nigerian Labour Congress, and also with Yowa Pera, the coordinator of the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office of Nigeria. Yemi, let me start with you. Two perspectives on the table. The Deputy National President of the NLC stating the opposition of organized labor to the proposed deregulation of the downstream sector by the Nigerian government in 2022. And it was very clear. He said that the position of organized labor is completely unambiguous. Then we had a conversation with Yowa Pera, who talked about the National Social Register, which the federal government is planning to use to make available 5,000 transport fare per month to a population of about 40 million poor and vulnerable Nigerians. I'm sure you listen to both now. First, your take on the proposed deregulation, and then the mechanism of this 5,000 naira that would protect poor and vulnerable Nigerians.
Thank you. Actually, I'll start with the reverse, because I think even though a lot of Nigerians don't trust government with the social register, I think they've done an incredible job, actually. It was started under Miriam Owais in the office of the vice president before it was moved out of there. And the process was validated by several civil society organizations of ensuring that, in a sense, it was community validated that these are the poorest of the poor. So I think the process that they set in place to develop the register, and as he said, it was meant to be gradual, building it up gradually and ensuring that if you have 138 data points of any individual, that's more than I believe any probably government agency has on citizens. I think it is to be commended that that was started. However, I think it's interesting that we've invested so much in this in a country that does not have a census. So there's no actual data that speaks to who is a Nigerian. We've talked about the various data points. So you have driver's license, voter's card, BVN, national identity number, all of these things in separate databases. But Nigeria as a country has not done a population census since 2006. So I think the context of it I find quite fascinating, that we don't have a database of Nigerians, but we've invested incredible amounts of resources to build a database of the poorest of the poor, which is valid because they do need support. And as he kept saying, the UN uses it. It's great that the UN uses it, but I think it'll be more strategic for an independent nation to be able to speak to its nationals rather than just the poorest of the poor. Now, the second phase of this, which is the urban poor, that they're trying to get people to register and all of that, which is great. And one of the things that I find interesting is that state governments haven't used this opportunity to even count. There's nothing that stops a state government from conducting a census, absolutely nothing. Babatunde Fashola started the process as governor of Lagos State. Unfortunately, he wasn't continued with his successor. But I think it's something that state governments can own. So even if the Nigerian government, federal government, is not counting citizens, nothing stops a state government from counting its own citizens so it can plan. You need to know who is in your state to plan water, roads, housing, education, healthcare. And so it says a lot that even though the federal government is not planning, the state governments themselves who have to deliver these services are also not doing that. And then so if we now take that and go to subsidy, it's very interesting because January will be 10 years since the Occupy Nigeria protest that was triggered by a removal of subsidy. And the rationale then was that government should stop being lazy and penalizing Nigerians for its own inefficiency. Because the big song and dance at the time from then Minister of Finance, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, and Minister of Petroleum, Diezani, was the fact that there were loopholes in the subsidy infrastructure, that people were making money out of it, the government was losing money, so therefore we're going to remove it. And those of us who came out to protest at the time were very clear that the fact that you are inefficient, incompetent, and unable to manage a process should not then be taken out on Nigerians. So therefore, fix it. Fix the process, ensure that it doesn't have loopholes so that we can have a more robust conversation around subsidy. 10 years down the line, it has not been fixed. 10 years down the line, we have refineries where, according to the Accountant General of the Federation, we're paying salaries and nobody's doing any work. So I remember the 2012, part of the promises was that, we're going to fix our refineries. Turnaround maintenance has been on our budget for I don't even know how long. Again, a separate conversation entirely. We will turn around our refineries. We will fix our refineries, but we don't fix them. Labour members get paid for doing nothing, yet they will protest when they're about to remove subsidy, but that's a separate conversation as well. So we're paying salaries, we're keeping these entities that are not doing anything. So government itself is not serious, number one, from that side, and actually getting the refineries to work so we know where they are. Secondly, unfortunately, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria has no clue, zero clue when it comes to this thing. Because, and I would say, I'm sure you can find accurate footage as a media platform. When he was coming in as president, he said that there was no such thing as a subsidy, that it was a scam. Unless I missed the World Press Conference, Muhammadu Buhari is yet to say that, oops, I was wrong. There is a subsidy, we cannot afford it, and this is what we are going to do about it. Again, unless I missed it, that hasn't happened. So you cannot then blame Nigerians for not trusting this whole song and dance that we're doing. Are we wasting a lot of money? Without a shadow of doubt. Is there a clear strategy around how we want to get out of this? No, there isn't. Because within the same government, some people think we have subsidy, some people think we do not have subsidy, some people think it's a scam. And might I remind all of us that, unless I'm mistaken as well, I think maybe one person or maybe two people were prosecuted in the findings from 2012, from Farouk Lawan to Femi Otedola to all the different people that were named in several reports. Not quite sure anything happened. So yes, it is a problem that we're spending an incredible amount of money. It is a challenge that Labour does what Labour does, which is slightly a bit dishonest, really, in how we engage this thing. And this now cash transfer that we want to do to the urban poor, it's an interesting thought, but again, without a larger strategy or a larger plan that sort of takes that we've looked at this thing, and this is how we want to phase it out. So we're going to give cash for how long? 1 year, 2 years, possibly 3. What does that look like? This year, we tried modulating pricing. It worked for a little while, then we stopped because it was getting too high. So the many starts and stops speaks to a more fundamental issue around honesty, around how we want to run this ecosystem.
Well, thank you, Yemi. Let me come to you, Chike Ogea. Listen to both Joe Ajero and Yowapara.
Yeah, I definitely did. And to a very large extent, I think Yemi has put the major issues on the table. For me, if we start with the case of the NLC deputy president, I guess he is, actually said that he accused the government of dealing with them in bad faith. I think that's what is resonating there, because they're in talks with the government, either in the case of the electricity or in the case of PMS, and government, adjourns sine die, as he says, which means we adjourn the talks indefinitely without a resolution. Where does that now leave the NLC? Exactly where they are, and that is why, there's a difficulty of getting a middle ground there. But to me, I'm looking at that situation of the subsidy in two major issues. The first one is that the kind of data that's been coming out over time has talked about, I can't recall the exact figure, but something like 1.3 trillion is what, is embodied in the subsidy. that Nigerians are enjoying from petroleum. And then there's this talk that the math of that is that what the component of the 5,000 that they intend to pay to this, is it urban or rural poor or hopelessly poor or whatever the criteria they are using for that, is much above the figure of the subsidy. So I begin to wonder, does that really make sense? You know, is it not more like robbing Peter to pay Paul, or digging, you know, trying to fill one hole and in the process digging a bigger hole? So those things are not clear at all. Funny enough, you know, I listened very attentively to when the man from the social safety net spoke. And he gave the impression, but he used a monthly and a dollarized figure, that actually there will be some savings in that whole arrangement. Well, up to now, there's no clarity on that. These are the kind of things I think the government owes us. We need clarity on that kind of information to be able to come to an informed decision. Because let the truth be told, we are an oil-producing nation, and every oil-producing nation must have some kind of benefit it gives to its people for being lucky to have, you know, that commodity in the bowels of their earth. Now, we have also come to the conclusion, which is a logical conclusion, I dare say, that there's so much corruption enshrouded in this subsidies regime. I mean, that's been a conversation that's been going on forever. And if government cannot sort out the corruption, and at the same time government cannot sort out the case of our refineries, just like Yemi said, we have refineries that are not working, that salaries are being paid, and, you know, all of that, then there is a major problem. Those are the things I think we have to fix, and we must fix them before next year. Otherwise, it's just going to be a riot. We're just going to be in a catch-22 situation where we might not even know what step to take. Again, the whole idea of this government and how they came in, just like Yemi tried to allude, comes to mind. This government came on the back of a mass hysteria against subsidy. Everybody knows that. There was the Occupy Nigeria, got notable Nigerians, Wale Soyinka, even our dear Yemi Adamolekun was part of them. And she just agreed that herself. Now, what about this Volta-Face, which is a 360-degree turn, and they are the one pushing for this? But, you know, one thing that is clear to my mind, you know, and this is a case of free advice I want to give to the government, that I'm sure it should be clear. This is not about labor. This is not about anything else. This is just about pure, ordinary Nigerians. Nigerians are not going to take that kind of thing. Already the issues in Nigeria are so much. The downtrodden is so overwhelmed with issues. You can't even go from one place to the other in peace. People don't know when their next daily meal is coming. People are dying for diseases that can be treated with 20 naira. So when you look at all these kind of situations, and you're talking about removing the little subsidy they have and replacing it with something that is not even clear, you see? So, I mean, like I was saying to the gentleman before he left the studio, I don't really envy his job, and I think he's doing a great job, you know, from what he has said they've done. But there still needs to be a lot of information that must be given to the people for us to be able to understand and believe in all those things he said, knowing all the devils we fight in Nigeria, because there's the technological issue, in all this subsidy cash transfers they are thinking about, whether it's e-wallet, whether he says POSs are springing up in the rural areas every day and all of that. What is driving those POSs? How do they work? We know there's no electricity there. You see, so these are lots of issues that are in there that needs to be clarified before a decision has to be taken. But I think it is in the interest of government to clarify those issues, to really knuckle down and do a lot of work. I can assure you the people have very little confidence in this humanitarian affairs ministry, where we actually saw them handing out cash at some point, and we're wondering what's all that from. And really and truly speaking, in Nigeria today, I wonder how anybody can tell me who the 80 million poor people are in Nigeria.
Well, Professor Akintera, was the big paradox that we're dealing with, the conflict between economic realities and the attempt, on the other hand, by government to play politics.
We have been taught that parallel lines do not meet. What we have listened to is a reflection of parallel positions. That of Irowa, Pera, reflects the position of a decision, a determination, while the position of the Deputy President of the Nigerian Labour Congress is that of determination and resolution. In this case, you now have a situation of decision already taken, a resolution already taken to remove subsidy, while the Nigerian Labour Congress is saying, no, that is opposition. It's a question of what I normally refer to as order and counter-order. The outcome cannot but be disorder. Now, when you look at the issues involved, Chike and Yemi had rightly drawn attention to the problem we are likely to face. And from the various questions raised by Reuben, you cannot but accept immediately that, look, there is a problematic that has to be investigated. First of all, the first, I think, the first guest now told us, no, I think it's the second guest. He told us that their figures, their statistics are valid. They have integrity. They are reckoned with because such figures are used by the United Nations. The question I will ask at that level, being a research fellow, is that, look, when you don't have alternative figures, what do? The UN is simply making use of what is available. It's as simple as that. Statistics in Nigeria, either from or as given by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, you have many contradictions there, even in the same document. Now, you are talking about the international community using that. I'm not saying they have not done well. They have tried. But the extent to which their best is good is an issue. There is the issue of trust. Reuben rightly drew attention to it, and the two guests tried to address that, but tangentially. You see, what is happening at the level of the people of Nigeria is that the perception of the government, the perception of corruption in political governance remains the issue. If you look at the editorial of This Day today on page 12, 3, 4, 5 critical issues were raised there. And I asked myself as a research fellow that, do you mean that these issues are raised, that they exist? And when I try to investigate, they are there. Look at it first of all. Attention was drawn to the fact, and the labor union drew attention to it, to the fact that the money, these 5,000 naira times 40 million people, or 80 million, the total amount to be paid is more than the income, being generated. You are removing subsidy. But the value, the amount of the subsidy you are removing is less than what you are going to give out. So please, when you take a look at this, it becomes more interesting. No good statistics. Then the fear of economic consequences raised in the editorial. The analysis is fantastic there. They talk about no budgetary provision in the 2022 budget. When you look at all these issues, then you ask yourself, how do you come about all these your own figures that you are determined? Why even 5,000 are not 2,000? Why 5,000 are not 10,000? Reuben raised the issue of how do we determine who is poor in Nigeria? And who is a Nigerian? The definition of a Nigerian is not far-fetched. But the definition of a Nigerian poor, in spite of what our guests have given us, is at best ambiguous. So in this case, I think they have done well, but they have not satisfied me.
Well, Professor Akinterewa, thank you. Let's bring the conversation on this to a close with reference to the editorial of This Day on Sunday. This Day, the Sunday newspaper, at page 12. The editorial is titled Subsidy Removal and the 5,000 Naira Proposal. And it says the deregulation of the downstream oil sector has become inevitable, but the palliatives to cushion the impact must be well thought out. And the newspaper concludes. It says, the position of This Day is clear. From inception, more than 26 years ago, we have been consistent in highlighting the fact that subsidy in the downstream sector of the petroleum sector is a byword for waste and corruption. So we wholeheartedly endorse any attempt to remove it. But a major economic decision with implications for the social well-being of most Nigerians should not be handled with levity. Creating another slush fund for some people to mismanage in the name of subsidy removal is not the way to go. This is the newspaper on Sunday at page 12. We move on. We take our next subject. The federal government of Nigeria last week finally responded to the Lagos State Judicial Panel of Inquiry report on the Lekki Toll Gate shootings through the Minister for Information, Lai Mohammed, who claims that not only was there no massacre, there was also no live ammunition used at the scene.
Yet another wondered how a judicial panel could use the words massacre in context and equate such to a massacre. All these and many more have raised right questions on that report. We salute their courage and refusal to be cowed by the rapidly lit mob that has been screaming blue murder since the report was released. The team finds that from the medical data examined, including the time and arrival at medical facility and the nature of the injuries sustained by the victims, who were taken to the 5 medical facilities, that no military-grade live ammunition, high velocity in brackets, was fired at the protesters at Lekki Toll Gate on 20th October 2020, within the time frame of reference, which is 1830 to 2034 hours.
Well, Lai Mohammed, Minister of Information there, was very dismissive of the report that is in circulation from the Lagos State Judicial Panel of Inquiry. He accuses that panel of engaging in fake news, inconsistencies, unnecessary innuendos, promoting tales by moonlight, not even sparing a thought for owners of businesses who were affected, and yet was engaged in a chase after what the panel described as a massacre in context. Well, there are divided opinions as to whether indeed the Minister of Information should have responded in that manner, or whether or not the federal government should have waited for the white paper that the Lagos State government talked about. Chike Ogia, let me start with you. You were once a Commissioner for Information. He's Minister of Information.
I'm speechless.
Is this all in the line of...
I'm totally speechless. I'm totally speechless. And I have to respect decorum because this is a public and an international channel, I must say. So I have to keep the focus. But the funny thing is that exactly what the minister was complaining about is what he's guilty of. You see, that's the first irony ab initio that has vitiated his case. He is saying that people ran to conclusions, they did not wait for the state government, because don't forget, this panel has absolutely nothing to do with the federal government. The state government, the governor that commissioned the panel, has received the panel, has thanked them. I know the integrity and the kind of people from the retired Justice Mrs. Okwobi, who was the head of that panel, to Ebon Adegborua and all the other members of the panel. I know these are forthright people who have nothing to gain from this. And anyway, you call tales by moonlight things we actually saw with our eyes. What is the name of the DJ girl? She streamed these things live. How is that tale by moonlight? But be that as it may, because, you know, everybody seems to be jumping the gun. And, you know, all I will say is that, you know, the minister should hold on. And the minister should also respect decorum. It's very important. You cannot come out as the Minister of Information of the country and say that even goats, when they get lost, their mothers go and look for them. And you are referring that to human beings, to Nigerians, making that kind of allusion. I mean, like I said, I was gum-smacked, to say the least, when I saw that outburst. And if it's not that, you know, I wonder how this government is being run. Like you said, I'd been spokesman for a government that, like I was saying to you off camera, had well over 60 cases, was taken to court every day. And maybe the first governor that was removed from office just as he was getting ready for an election. He had to do 2 elections in the space of 3 months. And all of that, I mean, the odds couldn't have been worse for us. But we respected decorum. And when you are a spokesman for the government, you must, it is important, to speak with decorum, especially when you're addressing your country people. That's all I can say for now, please.
Okay. Professor Akintenwa, before I go to Yemi Adamolekun.
I don't know how you describe decorum. Lai Mohammed has been given a special name in the social media. Verbally, because his name is Lai. His own name is, in terms of spelling, is L-A-I. But it has been interpreted, spoken, addressed as L-I-E, lie. That is, he is a liar. Liar, L-I-A-R. So, Lai Mohammed means Muhammad that tells lies. Consequently, the people who are listening already has a perception of him that, look, he's a propagandist. He's a liar. And there is absolutely no, even when he tells the truth, the submission, the conclusion is that, look, this is lie at its best. Now, the second point is that, and you rightly pointed to that, what he said is conflicting with what Mr. President told Nigerians. The president said, well, we will wait for the white paper before determining, before articulating the next line of action. But look at him now. He is no longer waiting for Mr. President. When Mr. President spoke, he spoke for his government as well. And the Minister of Information is part of that particular government. That clearly shows inconsistency, non-coordination in terms of policy pronouncements. Now, when you look at the government itself, like when we were discussing removal of oil subsidy, before Mr. President was elected, by that time, he told Nigerians that, look, all this issue of oil subsidy was fraudulent, and that he will address that. Lai Mohammed is towing that particular line of saying one thing in the morning, then in the afternoon, running away with it. We can understand that as a spokesperson, you need to support and defend your government, but not recklessly.
Well, on that note, let me bring Yemi Adamolekun into the conversation. Yemi Adamolekun, your reaction to Alhaji Lai Mohammed's reaction to the Judicial Panel of Inquiry report from Lagos State.
Well, okay. Prof said a good starting point. But it really is quite sad. And as a Nigerian, Mr. Mohammed's choice of words, not this time, and just over and over again in the way that he refers to issues generally, but in particular this ENDSARS matter. As Mr. Ogia said, reference to goats and citizens, he called it a bloodiless and bodiless massacre. I mean, just very flippant in his choice of words, and it is really very unfortunate. Not only that he does it, but that he's doing it repeatedly, and nobody, including his boss, thinks there's anything wrong with it, that no one has called him to order. There are other ministers in cabinet that I'm surprised that this is not even a conversation around how this is badly reflecting the federal government or the administration. And he does it, and it seems, the fact that he continues to do it seems to me speaks of approval by his colleagues in cabinet. I'll read paragraph 6 from his speech, just so that we're clear. It is clear from the ongoing that the report of the panel in circulation cannot be relied upon because its authenticity is in doubt. Besides, the Lagos State government, being the convening authority, has yet to release any official report to the public. Now, this aligns with what Prof just said in terms of the president saying we'll wait for the white paper. However, Mr. Mohammed decides to spend time writing about 9 paragraphs, commenting on a report that he himself doubts the authenticity. I'm sorry, but does that make any sense? You say the report is not authentic, yet you spend time to analyze the report, call Nigerian citizens goats when you're referring to reports, and discard, disdain, insult the people who sat on a panel of a report you say is not valid. So I'm not going to sort of dignify the rest of his response with any commentary by saying that the fact that in his own submission, he says that the report is not authentic, then goes ahead to disparage it, just says a lot about his character. And I think it is, as a Minister of Information for the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Lai Mohammed does a huge disservice to Nigeria.
Well, on that note, we'll take the next story, also about the federal government of Nigeria. The federal government has announced April next year as the official takeoff date for the country's proposed national carrier, Nigeria Air. This announcement is coming almost 4 years after its launch. Addressing reporters after the Federal Executive Council meeting, the Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika, said the national carrier will be run by a company in which the Nigerian government will hold a 5% stake, while Nigerian entrepreneurs will hold 46%. The remaining 49% will be reserved for yet to be assigned strategic equity partners, including foreign investors.
The very quick, maybe perhaps structure of the proposed airline, government will be owning not more than 5%. Not more than 5%, below 5%. So 5% is the maximum equity the government will take. Then 46% will be owned by Nigerian entrepreneurs, 46%. So if you add that, it's 51%. So 51% majority shareholding by Nigerians. And then 49% will be held by strategic equity partner or partners that will be sourced during the procurement phase, which is the next phase. This airline, if started and within the first few years, will generate about 70,000 jobs. These 70,000 jobs, they are higher than the total number of civil servants that we have in the country.
Well, let me come to you quickly, Chike. You are close enough to the aviation industry to be able to comment on this with the flair of an insider.
Well, excuse me. The topics today seem to be, you know, you are taking me back to my previous life, you know. Yes, aviation, that was exactly where I think I did my life work. And I thank God that what the minister is even talking about was something that I, as a person, and the work I did there is an embodiment of that, which really is about, you know, would I call it free privatization, deregulation, open market, and all of that. Getting government to take a back seat in aviation, I think that's very important. You know, there's always been that cliche that said that government has no business in business, which is true, because government business is basically seen as nobody's business, and that way nobody takes responsibility for anything. But be that as it may, we are dealing with a very, very sensitive issue with, you know, this Nigerian air situation. If I recall, I think it was in 2018, this kind of moves had been made, where a logo was launched in the air show in Farnborough in the UK with a lot of fanfare, and all after that, everything went dead. I mean, basically, I think the bottom line was that there were no funds to push this forward. Now, I think Nigerian situation is even worse than it was then in terms of finance. So even the 5% that the government is supposed to use to push this, has it been budgeted for? Are we sure it is there? You know, those are the kind of issues we are looking at. In one word the minister used, which really intrigued me, he said, if it does happen. I listened very attentively to those two words, very, very strong. So even he in his mind knows that there are these issues around the table of whether this thing can happen or not. Personally, I think is the way to go, especially when you look at the shareholding that is going to be owned 51% by Nigerians. That is great. Whether they are institutional investors or private sector businessmen like me and you, we have to go and look for money so we can invest in it. That's good. But even the 49% stake that is going to be foreign, we are looking at these investors that are supposed to come into Nigeria at a time like this with all the signals we are giving out, with all the indices of what's going on with our security in Nigeria. I wonder, you know, how attractive that will be. Like they always used to say, you know, money goes to places where there are a few things in place. One is that there must be peace, there must be predictability, there must be sanctity of contract, you know, all these indices. And we all know that these are things that have taken flight in Nigeria in recent times. So it will be a hard sell for the minister. I wish him well. You know, there's a school of thought that says that Nigerian Eagle, I think that's the one it's called, and they are thinking that why don't they just take ARIC and Aero, you know, pay off whatever debts they have, sort it out within them. Government is still government, whether it's AMCON or it's the ministry, and then get that, because of the infrastructure that is already there, get that to be like the flag carrier of what they want to do, because either one of them, I don't think is going to be a national carrier. It's going to be what they call a flag carrier, because like he said, government is just going to take the back seat in it. But then the minister himself had knocked that position down by saying that, you know, these debts are so much, and he has more or less twisted the civil aviation, yes, by saying, I'm sure you will not register that, and you know what that means. So, you know, these are all the kind of things. Then, of course, people looked at it while the minister was trying to paint this rosy picture about it. He actually made a huge gaffe by saying it will create about 70,000 jobs, and that is more than the federal civil service, the Nigerians that are in the public or in the civil service. And I think there's a document to show that that cannot be correct, that our civil servants, our federal civil servants, are much more than 70,000. So you see, public officers, generally, we have to, when we're in the public space and when we're giving out information about critical national issues, we have to research, and make sure that the facts we are giving are unassailable. I think it is very important.
Yemi Adamolekun, Nigeria Air, NG Eagle. This is just about national pride without anybody thinking through properly.
I think so. As Mr. Ogia has mentioned, aviation is not an industry you go into lightly, number one. It's not a money spinner. The margins in the sector are very, very thin. So I think I'll say two things. One, the margins in the sector are very thin. So something that's then being floated by Nigeria that has, in a sense, no efficiency is not our middle name, let me put it that way. So that cause for concern. And then secondly, the point he made with the minister saying 70,000 jobs, the attempt to over-glamorize what it is that we're doing also speaks to me of sort of fundamental flaws in why we think this is important to be pursuing at this point in time. As he also mentioned, we have Nigerian airlines that have a lot of debt, that are in trouble. Can they not be repackaged for a national airline if we really think we want to have one? ARIC, for example, did very well on the West African coast. All of that has shrunk over time because of management. So and it's privately owned, so it's not government owned. The point that government would only own 5% of it is, I think it's an important point that he made. Again, government business is nobody's business. But just in the grand scheme of things, I'm not very enthused about it, to be honest. So I haven't, it is what it is.
Well, Professor Akintarenwa.
I asked myself one question. Is there any fundamental difference between Nigeria Airways and Nigeria Air? You remove the ways. Now, what impact would that one have for the purposes of research? Second point, the problem of Nigeria Air commencing April 2022 probably is good agenda, but we have not been told what I consider as the problems in which the people of Nigeria are more interested. One, what will be the environmental conditionings of operation? Yemi tangentially mentioned, the issue of management. I'm not saying private sector, the entrepreneurial skills are not there. But the management, good intention to manage well, and the environment of operation needs to be reconciled. When Nigerian Airways was operating with ARIC Airlines, all of them as at today, the issue of landing rights, how many profitable routes will be approved, and so on and so forth. We should be addressing this because, you see, ARIC Airlines and others, they have limited profitable routes in the UK. Either they say you can only land in London, you cannot go to other places, you can't go to Birmingham. We need to know, for instance, the rules, the international rules. How many aircraft are they going to have? At least for public education. It is good that government will limit its own equity to 5%. The private entrepreneurs will have 46%. But at the end of the day, with the 51% the Nigerian businessmen will have, there is nothing to suggest that that numerical superiority will be brought to bear on the 49%. It does not. When you look at, if you look at it politically in the case of Knesset in Israel, when the government had a one majority, one-man majority to control. Now you don't have the capital. In South Africa, politically, the majority is controlling. Economically, the minority is controlling the wealth. So at the end of the day, we can commend them because Nigeria Air at least is giving a new identity that Nigeria, all right, is in the business of international aviation. So that name in itself can be good. But how to sustain and defend it in such a way that the corruption that killed Nigeria Airways in the past will not repeat itself under the new dispensation. Having foreign partners is good, but who says that foreign partners cannot be compromised?
Well, thank you very much, Professor Akintarewa. We'll see how all of that plays out. And I guess it's important to remember that the certificate of no objection,
yes,
that the Ministry of Aviation got from the ICRC, the Infrastructure Concession and Regulatory Commission, had a lifespan of 1 year. And that had already expired. So because the minister was referring to the cabinet, the Federal Executive Council, giving approval on the basis that it has been given approval. But that has already expired. Are they going to start the process?
Again.
All over again. So many questions, very few answers. Anyway, let's take our last subject of the day. The World Health Organization has designated a new strain of coronavirus, first reported in South Africa, a variant of concern, and has given it the Greek name Omicron because it carries a higher risk of infection. Following an emergency meeting, the organization said it is deeply concerned about the transmissibility of the Omicron variant, given that it has an unusual number of mutations and has a profile that is different from other variants.
So today, WHO's Technical Advisory Group on Virus Evolution met to discuss the variant B11529, to discuss what we understand about this variant and if it should be classified as a variant of interest or a variant of concern. Based upon the information that we have, particularly from South Africa, they have advised WHO that this variant should be classified as a variant of concern. So today, we are announcing B11529 as a variant of concern named Omicron. So Omicron, B11529, is named as a variant of concern because it has some concerning properties. This variant has a large number of mutations, and some of these mutations have some worrying characteristics. Right now, there are many studies that are underway. There's a lot of work that is ongoing in South Africa and in other countries to better characterize the variant itself in terms of transmissibility, in terms of severity, and any impact on our countermeasures like the use of diagnostics, therapeutics, or vaccines. So far, there's little information, but those studies are underway. So we need researchers to have the time to carry those out, and WHO will inform the public and our partners and our member states as soon as we have more information.
Countries take specific actions in order to protect their citizens from that. Some countries have acted very swift. Like you mentioned, the European countries have banned flights going from South Africa. We have not done that. We are going to continue to study the situation. We are going to monitor the situation. We will not be hasty in taking this kind of decision. We'll rather monitor to see the risk profile of this mutant and then take action that is necessary. There is no action that is off the table. If there is need to do it, we will not hesitate. The Presidential Steering Committee will put the necessary measures.
Well, Omicron, the fifth variant of concern of COVID-19 mutation. Before this, we had Alpha, we had Beta, we had Gamma, we had Delta, and now Omicron. Now, we had the incident manager for Nigeria there saying that, they're studying the situation. But a group of virologists in Nigeria have already spoken up to say that the Nigerian government should act swiftly in order to prevent a fourth wave, of infections in Nigeria, particularly now that we have the Omicron variant. At the same time, South Africa, which first reported it, says it has been unnecessarily labeled, and this is trying to, there's an attempt to label this an African variant of the COVID-19, whereas that is not the case, because this same variant has been spotted in the UK, in Belgium, in Botswana, and as far as Hong Kong. And of course, I read a story by the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akim Additional, saying that, look, this is not an African variant of the COVID-19. It is a variant of concern for the entire international community, and it requires international concerted action, and that, of course, there should be global equity in the manufacturing of COVID-19 and all of that. But, I hope nobody is going to label this an African variant of COVID, because that's the whole idea of the resort to the Greek alphabet by the WHO, that nobody should play politics with COVID-19. Let me start with you, Chike.
Yeah, exactly what you just said. I think this situation is two-pronged. We look at the politics and we look at the science. I think it was reported that this variant was first, I think, noticed in Belgium, if I recall, right? And in a few other European countries. Now, the South Africans, I think, should be giving kudos, because unlike other places where it was reported, when it eventually got transported to South Africa, they aggressively started commissioning studies to realize this
genome sequencing.
That's right, that had come in. And then instead of them to be giving kudos for that, they now want to be labeled. And like you said, they want to make it an African thing. So many European countries have already boycotted flights to South Africa and all of that. Fine, everybody has a right to protect themselves. They're also protecting us in Africa by also not coming. So you see, look, we've said this severally. One person protects everybody, everybody protects one person in this thing. So you that think you are banning people, by not coming out yourself, you are keeping what you have indoors. Okay, we too will keep what we have here. The statistics is there for all to see. How many deaths has Africa witnessed in the whole of this whole whatever variant, whatever mutation that has been around, compared to what has happened in America, or in the Americas, or in Europe, or in China, and all of that. So if you ask me, I think the situation is very simple. Yes, the science of it must take a predominant position. Countries have to be responsible and responsive to their citizens. So if anybody believes that, not going out to certain places is the best way to protect themselves, by all means, they should do that. And if at the same time you also believe that those people from anywhere else should not come into you. We saw the hardball that Nigeria has just played for about how many months now with Emirates over this kind of thing. It's all about this vaccine, nationalism, and politics, and you must do 20 tests before you come into my place, but you want to come into my place without doing any test and all of that. So we must be able to, maybe isolate those issues that have to do with politics, if you ask me, while trying to address the main issue of containing this deadly virus. Because, quickly, I hear this virus attacks the heart immediately, that it might be the deadliest of all the strains that has ever been noticed. And that is why, the world, not South Africa, has to take this very seriously.
Well, very quickly, we have less than 3 minutes to go. Professor Akinterewa, and then a word from Yemi Adamalekun on this before we wrap it up. Prof?
Economically, Nigeria consumes. Politically, Nigeria follows. Now, in terms of COVID-19, etc., I heard the minister saying we will be monitoring. We want to see what is happening. It doesn't make sense. That is followership. That is very myopic. When professionals, experts say, please, let us quickly prevent, because it is better than cure, I think we should quickly ensure that no inflow of passengers from affected countries should be allowed. It's as simple as that. It's commonsensical.
Well, Yemi Adamolekun, less than a minute. And the final word.
Really just to re-echo what Mr. Ogier said, that South Africa really shouldn't be penalized for its advanced science. Because if it was America that discovered it, everybody would be applauding the fact that, oh, the US has figured this out, blah, 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 blah. But because it is South Africa and on the continent, it gets a different reaction. And even the WHO has recognized that how other countries are responding is not commensurate with what is happening. But it's also important to note that it's not just South Africa, in fairness. Countries are just knee-jerk responding to anything. I think Switzerland now just banned the UK, and you have to quarantine for 10 days. Germany is on somebody's list. Israel, so the world is trying to figure out how to deal with this, but again, as long as we realize that we're all in this together, it will make a huge difference. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Yemi. Thank you, Professor Akinterewa, and thank you very much, Chike Ogier. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Reuben Abati. For my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week.